welcome to your favorite comic book channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
We have Geof Darrow in the house with a freshly baked Shaolin Cowboy Cruel to Be Kin hardcover. Off the top, Uncle Jeff, congratulations on this achievement. The biggest Shaolin Cowboy story and
Story.
massive, massive amounts of mark making to get this comic to happen. Thanks for coming by, Jeff.
Thank you for asking me. And thank you for your kind words. You've always been very supportive and kind, and really appreciate it.
And thank you so much for asking us to do some covers for this comic. Man, a dream come true.
Absolutely.
Dream come true. I remember there was a time when I thought Geof Darrow was just a Frenchman in rural France who I would never ever get to rest eyes on, let alone actually talk to. And before Cartoonist Kayfabe started, I would type in Jeff's name into YouTube, hoping for some kind of interview, something that could keep me company. And some of that shit's in French, and it made me so mad because like the longest thing that was in English was like maybe like 4 minutes or 8 minutes or something like that. Now we have a couple hours of conversation. Now we can actually talk to the man and go through the works.
Well, they did it some kind of a comic documentary, and they did something with me, and it was like a film, and they wanted send us a photo of yourself. I said, I don't want to. And I said, well, nah, you don't need a photo. They go, yeah. I said, well, do you got a cousin or something? I go, yeah, just run a picture of your cousin. And they did. Somebody saw it later. Because I mean, I left home when I was 17. I went to art school in Iowa. I never went back. And I had relatives that had, because we had family reunions, you know.
Yeah.
And I never hated those things, never went to them. And so I came from, my mother had like 10 kids in her family, and everybody thought I was a myth because no one had ever seen me. And when I went for my dad's funeral, they were coming to go, we never thought you existed. I was like, oh man. I like the idea that I was like this mystical character in Iowa.
Yeah, man. You were definitely a mystical character to young Eddie P. And beyond just the actual person, it's the artwork. How does one person make one of these drawings?
Yes.
Let alone a book full of them, or like let alone a strip full of them, let alone an issue full of them, let alone a graphic novel full of them, let alone many over a span of time. I just don't understand it. Jeff, we've been in touch pretty reliably the past couple
You
of
see
years.
on that last page, you
Yeah.
see that that lady there on the right?
Yeah, taking her selfies or snapping some pics.
That's my mother-in-law.
Is her name Annie?
Yes, because she has no idea she's in this book, because cell phones just mystify her.
Nah.
And so I thought it was funny, the idea that she'd be in the middle of it and be absolutely oblivious because she's trying to figure out just how to even turn the thing on.
That's so funny, man. Because you know, like if it's a younger person, that's somebody snapping pictures, like helping nobody, but snapping pics of this stuff. I wonder how much of that kind of Easter egg is in this work, Jeff, because I have my suspicions at times for sure.
Some, yeah. I don't remember a lot of stuff that
Yeah, sure.
I draw, and when I ink it, I'm kind of like, God, what was that for? What was I thinking or not thinking?
Would
Actually, not thinking.
this is a COVID project, right? Like when lockdown was happening.
I mean, this is my COVID comic that I wanted so desperately at least to finish drawing it in pencil, because if COVID got me, I'd have this for my wife and daughter. They could, they'd print, they'd get some money, and because I just thought, well, I was at that age where it's like, whenever they talk about if you're over 65, your chances of surviving COVID. I go, oh man, I don't want to hear that shit. Rather than the middle of nowhere, and we were pretty safe out here until the Parisians started coming out. And then they brought it with them.
Those damn Parisians. Jeff, do you scan the pencils of this? Do you have like a penciled version of this on in your files?
I maybe not. No. Actually, not this. No, the covers I would do because when I sent the art, I sent all the artwork to Dark Horse because I didn't want to scan it. I think maybe I told you this. because there's a place where I can scan it here in town, but I go in there a lot, and I thought they're going to think I'm crazy or I'm like a serial killer because there's so much violent stuff in here, and I could because and they never say anything, but I could just imagine they go, oh, here's that weird guy with the accent coming in here with this, because I'd taken all kinds of people with heads cut off and all that stuff, and so I thought, well, I'm just going to send it all to Dark Horse, which is really pretty stupid because I sent them by FedEx, and I knock on wood, they didn't get lost, but I done. But I'm gonna, because I mean, Dark Horse is gonna do a like one of those artist editions.
Amazing.
Yes.
But it's gonna just be in the pencils.
Can't wait.
Even cooler, man. What size is that book gonna be, dude? Like, cause you draw extra big. It's bigger than the 10 by 15 image area of a standard, Marvel DC.
Yeah, comic. It's I started. I'm doing a new story, and I got tired. I thought I started drawing even larger, and I measured the pages there. I've only done like 8 of them this size, but they're like 42 by 62.
Wow.
What? I think I'm going to stop.
What's
they're almost like, I think that was almost like hard-boiled size.
Is there a particular inspiration for doing it at that size? You're getting even more detail in there, or?
My eyes, I think.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when you're drawing, in a small panel, it's like I don't know, like you can't move around. It's like
right.
Whereas when it's a little bit larger, I feel like I'm like free range.
Yeah, that's Brendan McCarthy calls the wrist action, and I totally get that. Like, you get the crab claw hand if you're trying to get some of these Geof Darrow details in a 10 by 15 type size, but you could move around a little bit more. I was going to guess either eyes or wrist would be the reason for.
I was going to knock on wood. The wrist thing, I always when they started talking about that metacarpal tunnel syndrome, is that?
Oh yeah.
I don't know how I've not gotten that, but knock on wood that I haven't. But I've never had that problem.
There is some of those...
And I draw like a caveman, so I'm like.
Do you clutch on the page? I feel like with the stuff that you sent us, the originals and stuff, like that lead looked like it was pressed into that paper.
Yeah, it looks like a heavy line.
Yeah, if you see, especially because now I started drawing on where you have it on 1-ply Bristol Strathmore, but I used to draw on 2-ply, and those things are like engravings. I mean, you could like you could put like a slot car in one of those things.
Right.
And it races around.
Jeff, when you're drawing that big, is the paper taped down to the drawing board, or are you kind of moving it around as you're working in different areas?
Taped down. It's generally taped down.
Is it like very, very steep? The angle of your drawing board?
That's almost the angle where your arm was. That's pretty. It's very straight. Maybe that's what saved my so far my wrist. But.
Yeah, Neil Adams would always talk about like you draw with the shoulder, like you don't draw with you don't do this because this is how you get carpal tunnel, just that repeated movement. But like his thesis is like you draw with up here and you ink like that, rather than you basically keep the wrist locked in a certain fashion.
Well, do you guys know any comic artists that have gotten that? I mean,
I do, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of inkers get that for sure.
Yeah, the people I know that have like an arm pain or wrist pains, they are very intricate, like pen inking and doing just a lot of really little detail, with the pen nib. And the pen nib is somewhat unforgiving. I'm surprised you haven't had trouble, Ed, because you do a lot of pen nib, and that requires that pressure.
Yeah, like I got, I would go in and out and have just like little weird things happen, but ounce of prevention, pound of cure type thing. The second I start feeling a little something weird, like I got thicker handles for the nibs, and I switched to marker the past couple of years to just make sure that things don't get too out of control.
Whenever I quit my day job, I started using a wrist stabilizer to sleep in.
Yeah, I still
totally
do that.
Preventative.
Yeah.
And knock on wood, I haven't had any trouble. But I also thought the other thing you could do is soak your wrist, your hand in ice water, like at the end of the day, is like an athlete would do just to remove inflammation. I haven't actually done that, but it's in my bag of tricks of like if the pain flares up or if it's probably another one of those preventative things to do.
Yeah, and shouts to Jeff Smith because when we visited him at Cartoon Books like a decade ago, he went through he's a guy who went through a
Yeah.
terrible bout of that when he was
Yeah.
finishing up the Bone series, and he told us a story of his wrist was so jacked that he couldn't even make a fist. So he could clench. You remember this, right? He could clench enough to hold a tennis ball. So he jabbed his Raphael brush through a
My
tennis
God.
ball and inked some of the comic, holding this tennis ball with a brush sticking out of it until Vijaya just walked by and saw him doing that and was like, "Put it down right now. Like, we're going to the doctor." And he gave us like all these exercises to do to just kind of maintain, to make sure that you don't get jacked up.
Now, I understand that Miyazaki has a lot of problems, and he had full-time acupuncturists at the studio, and he'd have like needles in his hands while he was drawing because
He's he believes in the movement. Like when you watch that documentary, there's like the required exercise times. Like the alarm bell goes off and everybody, it's like pencils down and they're all doing helicopter motions and
right.
stretches and things before they get back to business. Jeff, let's look through this comic. Let's talk it up a bit. This video is brought to you by the Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon. There are 3 levels of support at our Patreon, and the King Kayfabers get access to our live stream recording sessions that make it possible to mitigate the kayfabe effect. They also get the videos before anybody else. So make sure you support the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel and get that early access. Ultimately, the videos are brought to you by the books that we make. You're looking at a healthy sample of our bibliography right in front of you. Jimmy's next book is going to be Street Angel, Princess of Poverty. It's coming to you in November. It's going to be a companion piece to Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive, in that it collects all of the material that was published prior to the Image Comics release. Jimmy also has Hulk Grand Design out there in the wild. Limited copies available. Make sure you get your hands on that as soon as possible. And the latest comic that Jimmy has right now, which is sold out, but he has promised to reprint this thing. True Crime Funnies, 3 nonfiction stories, including one that has a little something to do with some wrestling. Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus is coming to you in October, just in time for the holidays, collecting all 4 volumes of Hip Hop Family Tree with 150 pages of additionals. Also for the holiday season is X-Men Grand Design Trilogy, which is going to include the out-of-print X-Men Grand Design works that I put together, about a 250, 260-page trade paperback. Red Room is the current focus. 2 trade paperbacks of Red Room are out there right now. The comic I'm putting out these days is Red Room Crypto Killers. It's going to be 4 issues total. 3 issues are out right now. The centerpiece for issue 3, the backup feature, includes the first appearance of the characters that I'm using in my daily strip, which I'm serializing on my Patreon. Tom's in the house with us this round. He's got the hardcover I Am Stan coming to you sooner than later. I believe it comes out in September. We did a big video on this, and you guys showed up in a big bad way and started to do your pre-orders. Make sure you get your hands on this. This is a definitive documentary on Stan Lee. And the paperback version of his Jack Kirby biography is coming out sooner than later as well. Now that we're done paying the bills, back to the video. We got the Komodo dragon fight. These Komodo dragons, they recognize the red shirt cowboy from days of yore.
Childhood.
Yeah. And the cowboy's a pretty silent fella, so this is an opportunity to get some back and forth.
How do you learn about Komodo dragons to put them in here? Is this like something out of a Nature, a National Geographic special? You're like, you know what?
Yes. Yes. And I actually in the book I mentioned, and it must have stuck in my head, but when I was working on The Matrix, the art director, he is an Australian gentleman named Hugh Beta. He said, "Well, I have an idea. Can you do me a T-shirt of like a kung fu fighting Komodo dragon?" And I did the drawing from it. This was years ago. And then I'd been putting these Komodo dragons in the background in the previous book. And when I was coming up with this, I was trying to think of what I could do, and maybe I'll have him fight a Komodo dragon. And I didn't remember, it was one of those things that probably filtered through the granite of my conscience enough to where it became my idea. And then I'm thinking, oh man. So I wrote to him, I said, gee, I think I swiped your idea, and that's okay. But I just thought it was, I don't know. Because I wanted to do a real simple comic. I put him in the desert, And he'll have just a fight with his dragon, and then I'll be done. I'll get one out real quick. And then as it moved on, I kept thinking, well, I don't know. There's not really a lot going on. He's just fighting this thing, and people are going to think I'm lazy. And I should add a little bit more so it's a little
So,
weirder. And,
so with that in mind, would these pages up front have come later?
oh no, no, no! They because I had no idea what I was going to do, but I thought I just knew I had to let people know that he was still in the city because it starts right after the last book,
Right.
and so I haven't done a drawing of the city, and I don't think I mentioned it in there. I like the idea that it's my mind it's a small American town,
Right.
just because here in France, everybody when Americans say it's a small town by French standards, it's a bustling metropolis.
Right.
But yeah, because we really don't have that many towns that would be like that. But so I did that, and then then I came up with the thing. Supposedly came up with the fighting the dragon, and I'd seen like you say, Jim. I'd seen a National Geographic special. They were talking about Komodo dragons and how the mother has to protect the eggs because the father will eat them because they're rivals for the limited amount of food in the area. And I'd always been friends with Andrew Vax, who had always talked about family of choice, that you can pick your own family. You don't have to necessarily, if you're from an abusive family, blood doesn't mean you have to be with it. And I had my own warped way that, I'm going to put that in a comic book. So it's kind of a weird homage, goodbye to my friend.
It's a great casting of Shaolin as a hero without getting into like any kind of real sentimentality. It's almost incidental that, oh, by the way, he's saving this Komodo dragon baby. It's almost secondary in a way to Shaolin Cowboy just being cool and doing kung fu and having this great fight sequence. But it's also very classic, like good guy, bad guy setup. It's very easy to side with him whenever you have that as, the baby.
And it's also the lone wolf,
Right.
and cub thing. I mean, that whole idea,
We some years back, during COVID, we chatted with Peter Chung, but maybe it was the last time we talked to him. We talked to him a few times, the creator of Aeon Flux, and he's been getting into this space of teaching people. He's a mentor to many at this point, and he's very, very dogmatic in his thinking. Like when he talks to us, he's the guy who, like, when he talks to us, he's like, very often people think this, that is wrong. And then he'll describe his thing. And one of the pieces that he mentioned, probably last time, was when he has board artists working. He says, like, if you make everything interesting, then nothing is interesting. You got to have like moments of pause and stuff like that. This flies in the face of that 100%, and can prove his dogmatic thinking a little bit wrong, in my opinion, because I had a freaking great time reading this. I couldn't wait to turn the page to see what new atrocities, monsters, animals, cityscapes, just visual eye candy you were going to present to us, because you didn't have to do all this. Like, you didn't have to do all this work. You could have had 5-6 characters and that we would have been satisfied. But then they're fighting on top of like skeletons of giant dinosaurs and things. When you have your Komodo dragon as character, do you now have to? Because we see this Komodo dragon twisted up in a million different ways. What kind of reference do you have?
I got these little tiny rubber, like a little from Japan, from those gashapons. I have a little Kyoto one, and I actually have I had like a rubber chameleon kind of a thing, and I would just kind of twist it every once in a while to see how so it's like kayfabe sort of stuff.
Kayfabe.
But I think that's the first time I've used the word kayfabe, because that word is so. I still don't understand it.
We're going to isolate that clip and use it at the beginning of our weeklies. When it comes to reference, it is something I'm so curious about, because everything you draw feels right. So when I see this parasol and I see it in a million different angles and I see that the mechanics of it work, like, do you have like an umbrella that you're looking at?
I got one of those tiny little ones that come with the drink. And because it, I mean, and every once in a while, I'm not quite as anal with it in this one because it's like, oh God, because it's super complicated, even on one of those, because they're just, it's a pretty amazing little device, the parasol, and um, so that helped a lot. And that whole parasol, the parasol and he's wearing like a poncho. That's all reference to when I was a kid. The Clint Eastwood Man with No Name movies came out, and I didn't see them when they came out. And I kind of like, oh, I really wanted to see them, and but they were gone from the theaters, and they came up with these like. Actually, he's one of the producers of the Beatles. I think it's Alan Klein. I think he was their manager. There was this American guy who made these series of movies called The Stranger, and it was just basically the Man with No Name, except he wore kind of a blanket instead of and he had a parasol. And so I thought, oh, this is kind of like a spaghetti Western homage. And so that's why those are in there.
Geof, I linger on this spread because it reminds me of a photograph you sent me yesterday. Can you explain to the people what that was and what the plans for that might be?
Well, yeah, I ride my bike and I live in the country. And I was riding this almost a year ago. It's the anniversary. I see this thing on the side of the road, and I go by it, and I saw it was a dead animal. I go by it and I go, wait a minute, maybe the bones are still good. So I rode back to it, and this thing I thought it had been dead it must have been dragged off or dragged out of the brush by some animal. I figured it had to have been dead for like months because it was just the skin and the bones, and you could pick it up by the tail like a skillet. And
had some rigor.
Oh. And I looked at it and I don't want to take the whole thing because then it really smelled. So I ride my bike home and I get a hatchet and I go back. And even then I couldn't have. I'm chopping on this thing and I'm hoping no one comes by. I wanted to get the head, and I got the head, and it smells. And I get it in a bag and I got gloves on and I take it home. And about a week after that, my wife says, oh, there's a dead badger on the road, another one. Wow. And I go and here's this badger and it's dead. And I was like, oh, it's too bad. And, I go home and I come back about 3 days later. And my wife said, that badger, it's just covered in maggots. I go, oh, so I ride my bike over there. And the maggots, like in 3 days, had decimated this thing. So that other one had only probably been dead a week. How fast those things can devour. And this thing, the skull's almost completely cleaned out. So I get my hatchet again. And this time I got these bones and I put them in a bucket. I pour boiling water in there and bleach. And for about a year, I've been doing that for about a year. And I sent Ed a photo of my bucket of badger bones. There's vertebrae and there's claws but they're really great for drawing because, you can look at them and you get ideas for monsters and just spaceships, and because there's all these weird angles and they look like architecture, like the eye sockets and stuff. So that's what I was. Yeah. So they're about done. I can take them out of the bucket. I was letting them bleach in the sun.
One of the things I admire, Geof, in your work is how much everything fits together. It feels like there could be a real version of this, there could be a 3D version of this. And I was looking at this sequence, right, where he goes over this skeleton and then we're inside of the skull, and then he kicks the skull in order to close it on that pterodactyl. And I wonder if that's something that you come up with as you're drawing this, like you're sort of seeing the physical space and going like, oh, okay, it would work this way. Like this would make sense based on that previous spread. Is that something that you're kind of improvising as you go along?
Yeah. I know because I keep thinking with this thing, I go, oh, he's going to get attacked by this, pterodactyl, and it's going to fly off. And I go, what can I have him do? And I thought, there's like a skeleton in the middle of nowhere. And then even then I thought, it'd be funny if he like those cartoons when you'd see that you hear like a xylophone music.
Yes.
As they go across the back of the thing. That's what I hear. I never put sound effects in anymore because I think people can make them up for themselves. I think in my head, I hear them, so maybe people don't. But and so I had no idea how am I going to get rid of this terror. How's he going to? I mean, I could have had him shoot him because he's got a gun. But I thought, well, it'd be funny if it's sort of a Buster Keaton, even Jackie Chan kind of a thing where you walk into a room where you're in an area and you go, oh, what can I do with the objects or the decor that's in that particular place, and then
it makes for a very fun read. Like earlier, whenever the Komodo dragon fight happens and Cowboy cuts his tail up, we see the baby Komodo dragon then start eating a piece of the tail, like attracted to its smell. And it just feels like, you say Buster Keaton, but it feels like that, like a very physical comedy, just an awareness of kind of the physical elements that you've composed here. And what can you do with those? It makes a lot of sense as a reader, but it's something that I think separates an artist who's writing a story from a writer who is writing a comic.
Right.
I don't know if it makes any sense, but I'm always waiting for someone to come up and go, well, the Komodo dragon wouldn't be found in that type of area because.
We'll get comments. I'm sure people are very, very excited too. Even the birds that have been, Chekhov's birds, like you build the birds in early.
The bird scene in here, and I don't want to get too far ahead of anything, but it's one of the great moments in any comic I've read.
Yeah.
Now these pages are my homage to the Wachowskis.
Yeah.
Actually. Because in the middle of a desert, and there's a guy selling sushi, which is like probably the really terrifying thing to me. Because you imagine the smell.
Right.
And how long those things would stay fresh.
Yeah.
And all this is running through my head while I'm drawing this stuff. And of course, you can get guns and ammo and sushi, but when they were doing the Matrix, they were putting a lot of tropes in it that would let you kind of know that it was not a real world, because you see all these stereotypical things. And when they had a chase at one point, a car crashes into a fruit stand, and that was because that's just part of cinema. They always have to, in a chase, they'll hit whether it's a newsstand or a fruit stand or vegetable stand. And they had actually wanted me to be the guy in the fruit stand. But I didn't want to go anyway. So I put that in there because I always remembered them, and I put that in there as I doubt they even read these anymore. But,
beautifully cinematic piece, man. Because like when you bring that up, I think of Terminator 2, where there's like a car chase on a proper road, and just like there's some vehicle that's like one of those remodeled homes that's being transported or something like that, and that thing gets jacked. And you just know that the only reason it's there is for the shrapnel of it, which actually speaks to, in getting to know you, Geof, and like I'll send you some drawings that I'm working on every now and then, and you'll always have the greatest suggestions of how to like add movement and things in the drawings. And very often it's like smoke, liquid, if you're smacking somebody in the face, have some spit come out in the proper arc and stuff, and you see that a lot in these pages. A lot of directional devices to convey those movements and stuff.
The coloring on that car, I was just absolutely astonished that he put that rust on that thing. It's like, oh my God, the amount of Jesus Christ, yikes.
Yeah, man.
I don't know if you like it. I mean, I like it.
You've worked with Dave Stewart a lot now. It's been years that you've been working with him. Do you give him notes, or do you guys talk about?
No, I just give it
what
to
you
him.
Have in mind?
We talked in the very beginning when he was going to do it, and I said to him, he said, "What kind of colors do you like?" And I sent him a book of Hokusai and Hinoyosuke and Yoshitoshi. I like the color palette of the woodblock prints, the Japanese woodblock prints.
Right.
And also the Russian artist Bilaban, who does the Russian fairy tale books, stories of Baba Yaga, and the colors. It's really beautiful. And I sent him those. I said, "This is what I like," and he just did it. All I ever generally have to say is every once in a while I go, see that little triangle next to that finger? That's actually should be the color of his undershirt. That's not skin. And not even that often. And I always go, can you add a little more blood? Make it a little darker. Because, I mean, some of that blood, he just goes in. I go, like, could you put some blood stains on his pants? And that's about it. Sometimes we'll ask about what color do you think the monster should be, like the one in this one. I think because he's a racist. I think he should be really like white, like he crawled out from under a rock.
I'm on the title page here because it takes a village to color a Geof Darrow
Yeah,
comic,
yeah,
and
yeah,
we got a handful of
yeah.
color flatters that Dave Stewart presumably employs to
Yeah.
just kind of block out these fields of.
And I said, give them credit. I said they deserve credit because they, you know, I've been told that they said somebody told me that if you ever asked to do color Geof Darrow, say no, flat and stuff. You know. But I talked to Dave and um, I took less money up front, and so that the flatters could get paid more, and they really like doing them now. So that's what he tells me.
So here's the bird sequence
It's not. It's
that rivals the chainsaw sequence in the previous works.
mm,
And one of the things, first off, there's so much storytelling that's going on here. You got birds flying through the parasol, then in the next panel getting their heads cut off. The parasol gets destroyed more and more each panel, and like the damage is always the same plus more. You know what I mean? It's so
it's Buster
intricate.
Keaton. It's Buster Keaton. It's like start out small and just add more and add more and add more to. If you ever seen, I think it's Seven Chances, where he. Have you ever seen that one?
Mm.
Buster Keaton. Oh my God! One of the famous scenes is one where he's running down a hill and this boulder starts rolling, and then another one, and then another, and there's like thousands of boulders chasing him down a hillside. It's just amazing. He's a guy, and if anybody wants to draw comics, you can learn so much from watching a Buster Keaton movie because it's all silent,
Yeah.
and his storytelling is just amazing. Like in that same film, he needs to marry a woman by 12 o'clock, or he'll lose all his inheritance. And so he can't find a woman who will marry him. And so he puts an announce in the paper and says, show up at the church at 11:55 and blah, 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 blah. And he goes to the church and there's no one in there. And he gets kind of bored and he kind of falls over and he falls asleep and you see him. And then when he sits up, the whole church is full of women of all shapes and sizes. And they all want to marry him and they start chasing him. It's an amazing movie. That kind of digress. But Buster Keaton, Jackie Chan, all those guys, all those Wu Ping, all those guys love Jackie or Buster Keaton.
The sword fight versus the bird with the two small knives. One of my favorite moments in any comic ever.
You know what's great too is when Geof was making these pages. It's sort of maybe when this came out, we covered a art of Arzak homage book or something, and we were talking about how somebody drew the birds.
Eric Shanawar, I want to say.
I think it was Brian Talbot.
Oh,
if we're going to be naming names, but all the birds were of various sizes, but none were overlapping wings.
Oh, I remember that.
And it looked inherently so wrong. It was something that we talked about because to like produce that kind of chaos, it's hard to do when drawing because you want to compose things good, but like in order to compose things good when it comes to a real flock of birds, there has to be that overlap. And and then we see your example after that, and it's like, well, this is how it's done.
Yeah, it's so chaotic.
And it's because I did this bird and it looks pretty good. I think it's okay, but it looks flat. I gotta put another one there. Oh, but then I gotta erase that wing that I thought that looks good. And then I gotta put another one over that and cover up the.
It's astonishing how well you draw animals and how you just will incidentally like put them into your works. Like very often when a cartoonist, when they're very proud of the cat they drew or something, it's almost a highlight of a panel or something. It's almost a featured piece. But just in the backgrounds and things, you'll see these beautifully posed bulldogs, and we got a damn featherless chicken running around, and it all feels three-dimensional. It all feels solid. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, it even has like the gizzard, that part in the chest, between the chest and the neck there, that you believe is anatomically correct for a chicken.
Right.
I think of these chickens though, with no feathers, it's almost like a dinosaur. It's kind of a
Totally.
great
Yeah,
monster
that's
design.
because my wife was making chicken, and I'm looking at that, and I started playing with this thing. I go, God, this thing would make a great one because God, it looks like a dinosaur. I mean, it is. Then realize, that they were birds, and man, so yeah, because then the wings, they're just so funky. It's and the texture, it's just they're really disturbing. But
Would you have before your wife put the pot on or whatever? Would you take a bunch of pictures of?
I took a couple of pictures of them because I wanted to get the texture. And at one point, I just like went out and bought a rubber or a chicken, and I'm looking at the thing. It was my chicken, and I'd keep it, put it in the freezer, and I'd take it out and look at it, and I mean, I'd wash my hands because the thing must have been like a salmonella capital of Chicago while I was there because I had that thing for so long. I don't know if it was a chicken or if it was a because I couldn't find one with the head. I went to a Chinese supermarket, and you can find them frozen there. And that's where I found one. And I think it might be like what I was looking at was a quail or a.
That was one of the noteworthy things when we were out there in Tokyo, Jeff. Just noticing like you were getting those gachapons that would be very beautifully sculpted, that look like legit turtles and animals like this. It just seemed like you always have the reference part of your brain on when you're on the hunt or when you're just out and about.
That's amazing too.
Yeah.
And this is my Spider-Man. Steve Ditko.
Absolutely, right. With the big machine on top of Spider-Man. In this case, a big featherless chicken. Plus, you got the flying guillotine.
Yes.
Which
God, that movie terrified me. I couldn't watch it because I think it was the first time I'd ever heard any kind of techno music. It was German techno. Before it was techno, the soundtrack is really weird.
Yeah, man.
And play it every time he'd take that thing off, and I was terrified. Oh God, he's gonna throw that thing. The whole idea of just something flying through space and landing on your head out of the blue and cutting it off is such a stupid thing.
It's very visually beautiful, though, man.
Does music inform your thought process when you're putting together a story like this?
When I'm drawing it, because how about you guys? I can't listen to music or anything when I'm like writing the dialogue, and
sure.
Although it might not seem like it, but it's hard. Writing, I think, is really hard because people say I'm not a writer. So, but what little I do is writing. It's to me, it's very hard. It's like a different mindset. I mean, the drawing, I can just I'll listen to certain kinds of music. I put on television. I like to watch bad movies. Sometimes I'll have like some goofy kung fu movie on because I just like to listen to the dubbing. It's so funny to me.
Almost every novelist whose approach I heard them speak about, it's about 4 hours a day is really what they can put into the craft of putting together a novel or something. It's not like how certainly the inking part of a job, like you could just do that from sunrise to sunset.
Right.
But I think a lot of writers, they get a lot of their most meaningful work done in a way more condensed period of time than we're used to when it comes to drawing a page of comics. This is just
it's so weird.
Yeah, it's so surreal. And I do wonder how much you think ahead of time before you start drawing this stuff, because it's a series of like left turns that just like when you don't think it could go any further, you turn the page and it does. And it really rewards that kind of reading. And it rewards that kind of close reading. Like you could easily sort of bypass the little bird sword fight with Swiss Army knives. You could dash past that. It's possible. But then it's just because you're noticing some other atrocity on the page.
This is such an insane design.
Yeah, dude.
It's so over the top. It feels like it's something we shouldn't be allowed to show on here.
Right, but I
would look at it and it's like, I don't know, it's not really violating anything.
No, it's
My imagination, maybe, but
a literal little general.
Jeff, how long do you think this story took you to complete?
I, I'd like to a couple years maybe.
And breaking it down, does a page take a week to do?
Sometimes, well, actually, depending on like these, I could probably do it like 3 of them in a week. It was when it later on when it gets into the city, then it was like, oh my god.
there have been a couple pages where an image crosses like the spread. Are you drawing these pages like as spreads, or are you thinking
Yeah,
about the spread?
yeah. For better or for I was. Yeah.
When
I
it
don't know if I
pro-
succeeded.
when it crosses the spread, does that mean it's like one bigger piece of paper, or do
No, it's
you?
like one sheet of paper generally. Yeah, it's like a whole sheet of Strathmore, and a page. It's not like I cut a sheet of Strathmore in half. I've never used. No one has even ever offered me paper. Like Dark Horse has their comic. They've never even offered it to me. Not that I would use it, but uh, I think maybe once Marvel, one of those said, "Can we send you some paper?" And I was like, "No, that's okay." 'Cause not that I have anything against it. I just know that I wouldn't draw it that size,
Right.
and just the idea of having that those things drawn out, like I'd feel like I was in a pen,
Yeah.
like it's a fence.
Right. Yeah. A lot of pros they dislike the box, the rectangle.
I feel confined. This is where I was getting bored, and I thought people are going to be bored with this thing. And I just thought, what if I just drew a bunch of stuff I wanted to draw, what I always do anyway, but like different things, like for guys, and you see there's a robot and monsters and giant, and I
Yeah.
would only have to draw them once,
Right.
especially this thing on the right page, the I don't know what it's called, the nomad. Yeah,
Right.
I won't have to draw that thing once, and then I can in text, explain kind of.
It's an amazing design. I lost it when I was reading this and came to this page. Like you turn the page and see this, and it is just, we talk about eye candy.
Yes.
It is eye candy to the nth degree.
When we were at Tokyo Comic Con, Jeff was drawing on the placemat of the table, and it was something kind of approximating this in a way. Like it was this big giant thing that had like globes with fish swimming it in like these aquariums that were like stuck to it, and such this big super giant thing. It was so cool to watch because it was just flowing. Jeff, he wasn't looking at anything, dude, and it was
There
balanced and
wasn't
stuff.
because there wasn't anything.
Oh man, that was an amazing thing to experience. That was probably like a highlight of my trip.
It's fascinating to me to see the texture that's implied there without, like, usually texture is achieved through shading and kind of cross hatching and different
Yeah.
methods, and it's like this one feels very textural. Like I can almost picture that white surface versus some of the mechanical engine
Right.
pieces behind, and yet it's not from rendering or anything. Like it's really interesting that you're able to get these different textures without, resorting to a lot of heavy shading and cross hatching and things.
Remember, I drew this. We'd finally were able to move into my house I live in now, but the all my stuff was still in boxes in the garage because I had to have my office built in a small building on the side. So I was drawing in the living room, but I just remember drawing those. And I'd always wanted to draw kind of a big lizard. I don't that first panel, but I did like I like that giant Buddha head with the little guy inside.
Yeah, man. Hey Jeff, when we go to Japan, we could go to Kamakura and go visit the Daibutsu.
That giant statue.
Yeah. And
Because they when I was there a couple years before that, they said, "Where would you like to go?" The guy that ran Madhouse said, "I," because I used to go by that thing on the train. I want to see that big Buddha statue or whatever it was. And they took me to this place, but it wasn't that one. It was like another one that you could go inside of and like
yeah,
go into the head.
yeah, that's the one.
But there's another one. It's like this giant statue that you can see from the train. And that one I still haven't gotten to visit, but because it's just fun to me. Cool. I like the idea of being able to go into Buddha's head.
Yeah,
You
totally.
look through his eyes, it's like, so this is how Buddha sees it.
Right, yeah. Like, we went to check it out and looked at it, and somebody said, yeah, you could go inside of it. They took the money, but the eyes part was cut off. Like you could only go to the belly. I was
Yeah.
very offended. All right, back to the city. Now, this is the stuff where it's just like, how do you do one page of this? Let alone, we're just basically halfway through the comic. And also, another noteworthy piece of a Geof Darrow comic is lettering. Like, the signage has great lettering, but it's also that Bill Elder, like, chicken fat
Right.
of, like, extremely funny, punny, little tidbits that reward close looking.
Yeah, I do that like in this because I thought it tells you what the character of the city and what the environment that he's in is like. It's all sex and guns and food, which is kind of everywhere, I guess. But
And it's raw, man. Like it's pretty freaking hardcore.
it's
But
not a pleasant place.
but I feel like your humor style is that way just in general. In a way, like you made a couple of waiters laugh by knowing certain words for genitals in Japanese and
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
I love he calls him new dad.
Right.
I don't know why, but
And-
that always gets me.
Me too, and also suggesting that he's an it. Like, it's not a human, it's not a man, it's not a it's it.
Now, because actually, this is the third book. This is like for me, it was a trilogy, and this is the conclusion of it. And you see that because of these two knuckleheads that are there. They're from the first Dark Horse comic, the
Right.
Shemp Buffet. But yeah, I finally, well, I'm just trying to figure out how to end this thing. And I thought, well, I would bring those guys back. And they were goofy.
Yeah, real Keystone Cop kind of characters. The apartment is incredible. It's almost like nearly like a zoo, display.
Yeah, because I thought that they're no longer living in in Sumatra. I think that's where the Komodo dragons are. So I thought that they would hire somebody to paint their apartment to make it seem like they're still living in Sumatra. That was my thinking.
So funny.
Yeah, it's a great interior design
Goofy.
joke. It speaks to your level of cartooning, though, just having that kind of thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
And I feel like this book is full of those examples.
Oh, constantly.
You've got to draw a setting. Let's think about it for a few minutes,
Now, if you go back a page,
Yes.
now that guy in the last panel on the right, that's the guy that gave me the idea for the Komodo dragon. That's Hugh Badeup. He's this Australian art director.
Yeah, that's fun.
He was-
He felt like a solid character.
It's incredible the contrast between the desert and the city.
Absolutely. Yeah, it certainly helped out with the color. Dave Stewart's palette, building the relationship between the cowboy and the dragon family, in order to build up to their decimation, is one of those extremely funny pieces because you feel for them.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're just trying to get by. They're just trying to do their thing.
It's great characterization.
It is, and it speaks to the surreal.
And he gets him killed.
Right.
He saves him, but he's also saves him in the beginning, but he's also responsible for it. Like I remember I started this thing, and then I went to work on the Matrix, the fourth film. And a couple of these pages I drew on the weekends. I would go in the office and work on my comic because it was such a different mindset.
Yeah.
Drawing the Matrix stuff and then drawing that stuff that I didn't have anybody to tell me what I had to do. And I drew this. I remember this for myself. I mean, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but the sequence with the gun is one of my favorites because it's so fucking stupid.
It is. It's
In fact,
great.
if you could twist it back into shape and it would still work. I
Right.
think it's funny. But, and this next page, this is a page I had to add. This wasn't in the original. I had to put like a page between. because I don't like there to be like a blank page.
Yeah.
I want it to be one, so I added that.
You added it to the paper to the collection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a new one. And there's actually another a new page earlier on in the book too that I had to do, but otherwise it all kind of ran together. And this guy Hugh Bate comes back again.
And he's the fella that gave the bomb to the cowboy to deliver. So we got to get him back. Yeah. Once we see this old fella, looks pretty close to that guy that we saw earlier in the desert. You know you're in for some trouble. Some revenge is going to have to occur.
That stomach middle finger tattoo on him is a really funny little subtle design.
This is what I mean too, man. You got these dogs fucking, and it's not an easy thing to draw, but it's there.
Why would you want to? I draw these things. I go, there's nothing interesting in this drawing. I go, other than, dog screwing.
You know,
that's something everybody likes. Frank, like I've said this before, Frank was always mystified by with dogs crapping, and that just really bothered him.
I often think going through these pages while reading this comic, I often thought that the mindset must have been like, let's push it further, like let's make this drawing even more over the top, because it's what you just add more and more stimuli to these pages, and if people aren't abundantly clear on what I said earlier about the flying in the face of that Peter Chung stuff, I mean, come on, like we've given you many 130 pages of visual aids to show you how this thing just ramps up more and more and more, and it's relentless. It never stops.
The ability to choreograph this stuff in space is just it blows my mind. I don't know how you can keep that space clear
right
across a scene of this size.
Right, because Geof is changing the rooms and the posters are oriented in the exact same spots.
Yeah.
Do you put that together like in a sketchbook or as thumbnails to just kind of keep it straight?
No, when you draw it once and then there's got to be these posters here, and then I go back, I pull the pages out and I go, I drew a Hitler here and a Playmate here, and why did I do that? Because it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, like it doesn't go unnoticed though, Geof. It really doesn't, man, and it's so appreciated. This level of work, I think about you a lot in terms of just the medium of comics, because you make comics. Like Hollywood could snap you up forever if you chose to do that. But you still make not
comics. Anymore. Maybe when not now. I'm a dinosaur because I don't work on computers. And I'll tell you the secret. I shouldn't say this, but that room,
yes,
that right there, those were the Matrix offices. They did like sketches of the place. I thought, that'd be funny.
It's so funny, man. Heads coming through the desk. You can read this thing 5 times and see something different every time.
Yeah, easily.
10 times maybe. When we get to
the coloring on this sign, that the rust and the mist, because I drew, like everything's kind of fallen apart. Because in my world, people have just kind of given up, and it just, it breaks down. Well, too bad. We'll just, no one's going to fix anything.
I don't want to get too far ahead because there are some great payoffs with this major villain guy, and I want people to support the book. I want people to buy the book. And
best drawing in the book, right there on the right hand side, that one. And that's my homage to a Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny cartoon.
Yeah,
because there's one with Yosemite Sam where he's on a train, and Yosemite Sam yells at Bugs Bunny, "Draw!" And Bugs Bunny pulls out a piece of paper and he does a drawing of Yosemite Sam and hands it to him. He goes, not bad. And so he goes, let me, and he takes that piece of paper and he gets down on the floor like a little kid he's drawing and he's scribbling and he holds it up and he gives it a Bugs Bunny and he looks like, it stinks. It's always stuck with me. Yeah.
But I can comfortably say that we have not even gone to the tip of the iceberg in terms of visuals and in terms of grotesquerie. We'll leave it here. We'll leave it here because it's a big payoff when you flip the page from this point of view and you get to see what the final big boss is. Just an incredible comic. It is such a romp in this age of comics that are driven by the writers. It's such a breath of fresh air to have visually inspired comics. Geof Darrow is one of the few people doing them. There are certain guys, James Stokey, however you say his name,
Yeah.
Brandon Graham, Mahfood. There's very few people who are like driving the comics through the visuals, and it's the most fun comics to read and look at.
Yeah, there's been a real split in that regard, and I think like once in a while we'll talk about talking head comics,
Right.
and I think that's driven by just the deadline and low advance.
Yeah.
And this is like such an opposite way of approaching comics, and man, I'm grateful that these exist.
Yes.
Because like this is why I'm a comics fan.
Right. Let's take a look through
There we go.
some of the back matter here, man. Got the cover galleries, Darrow.
This is your daughter, right? Is this?
Yeah.
Does she draw digitally?
Yeah, and on paper. That one's on paper. But
Yeah.
she works now on. She's at a studio called Rough Draft. She does character design. She's done a lot of the character design on the new Futurama show.
Oh, that's super cool.
And there we got a.
Got a couple fellas.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you put like you and Stan and I always asked Jim. I was going to ask him to put the Street Angel in there, but I thought if I ask him, I'll put him on the spot because maybe he wouldn't want to do it because it would be detrimental to the character.
I regret
like-
greatly not putting Street Angel in there because like that's the ultimate team up for me, a Street Angel Shaolin Cowboy. But that said, this is one of my favorite drawings I've ever done. Like this just kind of worked out right.
It's great.
If you look at old Western stuff, I feel like often like those old dime novels would have this kind of limited color palette and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was really happy with how this turned out, but I will probably do a Street Angel Shaolin Cowboy drawing at some point.
Well, next time.
Katsuya Terada. I got this great sketchbook of his from my last trip out there, and that's something I want to do an episode on. He designed the. Do you remember Virtua Fighters, the video game?
Yeah.
Like I think he might have done the characters, but he definitely did the artwork for like the game covers and stuff.
Baby O Moon, really great stuff. And this is Simon Lee, Spider Zero. He sculpts all these things for, these monsters for, aliens and the films and James Herron. Really, That's the first illustration he's ever done. And and that James Herron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean this is the first illustration Simon Lee's ever done?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, that crab design's really great. I love the color contrast between him and the cowboy.
And then we got Arthur, which was really lucky. I mean, my editor, he was like, no. I said, Arthur told me you'd do it. He goes, no, leave him alone. He said he would do it. And if he does it, if he doesn't, I understand too. And he did it. And then I got, this is the one on the right. That's the film director Choi Hark, who directed Once Upon a Time in China and Chinese Ghost Story. And
great artist.
He produced the John Woo's movies, the Better Tomorrow 1 and 2 and 3, and he's a big comics fan, and I asked him to do it, and he did a couple of them for me.
Man, that's sweet.
That is awesome.
And then we have the process stuff in the back. This is neat. That was so cool. And like we'll just keep it on this page. We won't get too much deeper, but it's buttressed with some thoughts and meditations on what's going on in there, and to see how you lay your stuff out is very illuminating.
Geof, is this also your writing process? Like, would this be a draft of your story?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I just know, in my head, well, this guy's going to talk about this and he's going to do that. And, but that I don't. Sometimes you'll see things written there where it'll say something, but I've got a few things like that. Well, I think maybe it's in there. Maybe I didn't show it all.
Yeah, like I don't want to show all that stuff off, man, just to incentivize people to scoop it up.
You know what? For sure, anybody that's watching this and you're a Darrow fan, or maybe you even have the single issues, it's kind of worth it for this backup to see the sketchbook writing
Absolutely.
process. There's several pages of that, and it's illuminating. It's very different than what we end up with in terms of your art style,
Yeah.
but it's great to kind of see thought process being worked out in a sketchbook.
And then you can look at it and go, that's why it doesn't make any sense. He doesn't think it out very clearly.
And the dedication
Yeah.
for my brother, my teacher, my hero, Andrew Vax. At some point, Geof, sooner than later, I would like to do an Andrew Vax episode, and I think we should have you with us to just talk through his body of work, the stuff that we have, that he's put out, because I think you're a big part of him getting involved in comics, certainly with Dark Horse, and the comics are kind of fucking badass, man. And he's a real interesting guy. I've been listening to his audiobooks while working, and it's it's very very hardcore. Like you read one and then you got to go have some unicorn chasers afterwards, man, because of just the brutality and the stuff that guy faced every single day. So I don't think Jimmy and I could do him justice to talk about him on our own. We would need you with us at some point to just kind of talk about his comics and how you know him and things.
Yeah, I'm amazed that I do because I'm such a goofball, and
He needed a little goofball in his life with the bullshit that he witnessed and dealt with in his day.
yeah, we were at San Diego. One year he won the Bob Clampett Humanitarian Award, and he was there for it. And he kept one day cracked me up because he said he doesn't care about that kind of stuff, and he said. They gave me this Jed Clampett Award. And it cracked me up. I said, one, it cracks me up that you called it the Jed Clampett, but it cracks me up that you would know who the Beverly Hillbillies is. Because I wouldn't think he would have ever know any of that popular culture. There used to be a TV show called Route 66, which is about two guys in a Corvette, 1963 red Corvette. And it's a great show because you see America in the 60s, and they filmed it all on location. And Peckinpah did some of them. They're written by Sterling Silliphant, and they were just stories of it. And he's in an episode. He's like a character in the background.
Does he got the patch?
No. He got that later. He got hit in the face with, I think it was like a motorcycle chain. Some guys were.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you learn if you meet a couple, some lawyers in your life, especially criminal guys. Like, you have to work in an adjacent town. Like, there's a lot that ain't stopping them from coming to visit you after they get out and stuff. That's for sure. Geof,
I forget. I don't know if you a minute to tell you a story about
it.
When we're sitting at San Diego, we were talking about. I don't know how it came up, but there were like four of us sitting at a table at breakfast, and I said somebody, we're talking about sex education and this and that. I said, well, the sex education that my parents gave me, I said, my dad's talk, the talk he gave to us, me and my two brothers, was, he said, well, at one point we would go out, we loved to collect reptiles and amphibians. We'd catch toads and frogs and this and that. And we were out one Sunday, and we saw this pond, this farmer's land, and we went down there. Maybe there's some frogs or toads down there, and the water was just churning, and there's these toads in there. I mean, you could just reach down and grab some. We're grabbing them hands and fists, pulling them up. But as I'm pulling them up, there's like one toad, and he's attached to another one, a frog, and I'm like, I said, oh, they're giving each other's rides across the pond. They're riding piggyback. I remember my dad laughing, and so years go by, and we're in the truck. We're talking. He says, boys, I need to talk to you about something. He said, it's about how children are born, babies are born. He goes, do you remember those frogs that we caught? back when in that pond? I said, yeah. No. He goes, they weren't giving each other piggyback rides. They were making babies. And that was the end of the talk. And I'm sitting there and I was telling this to Andrew and I said, suddenly I said, oh my God. I said, I just realized something. I said, for years I thought, as a kid, I thought, well, I have to have sex with a frog to have a baby. But I married a French woman. And they referred to it as, oh my God. And he just like, his face, he's just like, what the? You're crazy, man.
That's hysterical, man. Geof, thank you so much, man. Shaolin Cowboy,
Thank
Cruel
you.
to Be
Thank
Kin.
you so much for your support and your kind words. It really means a lot to me because it's, for me, it's my, for whatever it means, it's my best book, I think.
It's fantastic.
Action packed.
To say the least. And it is out now. It is fresh. But all books
And they
nowadays,
once these are gone, they're gone because they won't reprint it at this like this.
yeah, I think that's the other thing too. It's a little bit bigger than comic size.
It's a really nice
it's
package.
bigger. Yeah.
Being oversized is a great way to show your work for everybody watching. It's a great way to enjoy Geof Darrow's work. So, as he says, like, you have to buy these books when you get a chance because they do go out of print, and hopefully we will see this reprinted in this beautiful format at some point in the future. But you can't guarantee that. So pick this one up if you're on the fence about it. And hey, I have the singles issues and the book.
Yep.
It's a spectacular package.
Thanks so much for coming by, Geof.
Thank you for having me again.